Welcome to another editing video on this channel. This time we're not going to look at Lightroom. We're also not going to look at some techniques in Photoshop. What I want to show you now is Luminar Neo. This software is quite new for me. I just installed it a few days ago, played around with it, got to know it. And in this video, I want to give you an introduction, what this software can do, how you can use it, basically the complete overview so you have an idea what it's capable of. Because it's not just the AI tools, which are usually advertised a lot. It's a fully featured editing suite, as I now learned, and I want to show you what it can do. What you see here is actually the catalog. So if you install Luminar Neo, you get the standalone software, which we see here, but it also automatically installs as plugin for Lightroom and Photoshop. If you like to use Lightroom to organize your raw photos and to develop your raw photos, it's no problem. You can do that and then just export the files directly into Luminar Neo to get access to all the tools that are available there. And we're going to look at those in a second. But you can also use it as your standalone editing software. And it comes, as you can see here, with a catalog. The catalog works similar to Lightroom with a catalog file in which the editing settings, the previews, and backups are stored. So the first thing you can do when you first install this software, you go up here to File, Catalog, and I suggest you create a new catalog and put it somewhere on the drive where your images are. Because per default, I think it's somewhere on Windows in your user settings, under Pictures somewhere. And if you want to have proper backup as you have for your photos, then make sure to create a new catalog and put it onto the same drive or in a similar folder as your images are, because it makes it easier to do your backup. Now, I've already done that. Another thing you might want to check is here under Preferences, make sure that the graphics processor is used, because especially for some of the AI tools, they take a while to process and you want this active. You can also set some caching sizes and stuff here, but there's not too many settings you need to do. Then here on the left side, this is basically your library or your catalog. And when you first create a new catalog, down here under Folders, it will be empty. And what I already did, I added one of my folders, the 2018 folder. This is how I organize my photos, and I can just add another folder, for example, even my complete pictures folder, and you get the complete structure of those folders represented in Luminar Neo. But now for the test, I just added those because I also have some photos here which I wanted to process using that software. So if you open it, it looks exactly like it looks in your Explorer. So it's important, I think, to have a good structure already when you save your photos on your hard drive. And this structure is then taken over here. And you see I usually have the years, then I have the locations. And for example, if you go to Hong Kong, I usually have a RAW folder, which is for the RAW files, and a master folder, which contains the edited PSD files normally when I use Photoshop. And then you can just go through here. You see down here I have a film strip, which I'm currently using. So it's similar to Lightroom. You can switch to the photos like you used to. Also here you see, I'm not sure, I hope you see it. This here shows that this file is already edited, so I already played around with it. You see this little icon down here. Same as in Lightroom, you have a little indicator that those are photos you already applied some settings. What you can also do, you can like your photos, which is your way of selecting photos. For example, if you're used to Lightroom, you can give colors, you can give stars and all that stuff. Here you just have the heart, which in my opinion is enough to get a selection of photos you want to edit. Those photos will then also appear up here under Favorites. You also see there are some smart folders here. For example, recently added, other photos are added. Recently edited, that's quite nice because you can directly jump to the photos you applied settings. And you can then also, want to quickly show you, if you click on a photo which you edited, for example, let's take this one here. You can right click, you can go to Adjustments, Copy. Or when you select multiple photos, you can also directly sync the settings. Now this sync settings is available. So similar like you're used to from other raw editing software. And once you click the sync, it will take a few seconds and then you have the same settings applied to multiple photos. And as I said, you can also copy the adjustments and then go to a completely different folder and apply them to images. Also, you have the typical revert to original. And what you also might notice down here on the left, there's another smart folder. It's called HDR Merge. This one was created when I tried one of Luminar's plugins, and this is what I want to talk about now. So if you see up here, there's this extras button, and if you click on it, you get access to a selection of plugins that Luminar is developing. So those are designed to extend the base software you get with Luminar Neo. And you see here's one, HDR Merge, which uses, I think, AI to merge photos that use different exposure settings. You have noiseless, upscale, background removal, even focus stacking. So I think I'm gonna try this also. And super sharp. This is something you can use to sharpen your images. Magic light, and I have to say this one I especially like, and I want to show you in a separate video. And then you also have panorama stitching. And yeah, the selection of plugins, I feel like this will grow over the next time because Luminar are very fast with introducing new plugins here. And yeah, I'm quite excited to see what's coming up next. So here you can simply install them and they'll then be available under your Edit tab. You also see here you have some generative tools. Might be familiar if you use Photoshop, generative swap, expand, all those stuff. I haven't tested those yet. It goes beyond this little introduction video. Yeah, anyway, this is your catalog and you can fully use it to browse your RAW files and then, for example, select, let's just do this, one of your RAW files for editing. Let's just find one of the photos I shot here in Hong Kong. So this one. And once you selected it, you can go either here to presets, where you can select from a set of presets that come with the software. You can also purchase presets, so there's a big marketplace, or you can also create your own. So I don't have any presets yet I want to use, so I'll directly go to the Edit tab. And now here is where the strength of this program lies, because you have a lot more editing tools than you have, for example, in Lightroom. For example, down here you have the essentials, and inside of it, this develop raw, this basically is what you have in Lightroom. And it's very important now, if you work on raw files, that this develop raw is the first setting you do to an image. As soon as you do any of the other settings, the image will basically be rendered and you'll no longer have access to the actual raw data when you do the editing. So that's one important thing. If you edit a raw photo, first thing you want to do, go to this develop raw. And here you can, same as in Lightroom, for example, select some profiles you want to use. Those will change the look of the image. Currently, I want to stay with Luminar default. And then you have typical settings. You can bring down the highlights to recover some of those details here. And I feel those sliders are not as intense as in Lightroom. So this is something I noticed. You can bring up the shadows. And here you have some smart contrast, but I won't use this now. This is just my raw editing. Same as in Lightroom, I'll focus on get out of this photo as many details as possible for the more creative processing which comes afterward. So here you also have the curves, which is also something I won't do to the raw file now. White balance is important. You should do this to your raw file. So I'll cool this down a bit. Can also change the tint and adjust saturation if I need to. Then very important, down here under optics, you want to remove distortions, fix chromatic aberrations, and you can also remove fringing. And then you can further adjust it. What you can also do here, if you have some keystoning, you can remove it here, but I'll not do that. Those are settings I typically do in Photoshop, but if you just have Luminar Neo, then you can do it here. You can also use this here, which does it automatically. So this button, and I think it did a fairly good job, so I think it looks correct now. Sharpness, something you might want to do, so yeah, maybe introduce some sharpening. So we zoom in. You also see, I find the software is very responsive. So compared to previous versions I used from Luminar, I think version 3 or 4, I think they completely rewrote the software for the Neo version. And I think it was a good thing because it feels much more responsive when I use it. But usually for the raw files, I don't add too much sharpening, so I'll leave it at a fairly low value here. And that's typically all I would do now to this raw development here. And now you see up here, this is the tools panel. Next to it, you have edits. And this is basically where you see all the edits you applied. And there will be more once you stack them on top. So as I said, the first one here, raw develop. And you see also here this noiseless. I think that's a plugin which I would have to install. So let's just do this. Here you see it. So this is a plugin. I'm gonna install it now. So now after it's installed, here this noiseless is also available, and I could now make adjustments, but I don't want to do it now because for those AI tools of Luminar Neo, I really want to test them separately, because from experience using some other AI tools, they might work on the image sometimes positively, sometimes they might introduce artifacts, and I really want to test this separately to really know how Luminar Neo plugins perform. So here we'll just focus on the base version. So going back to the tools, we want to now make some creative adjustments, and you also see now the noiseless also here together with some of the other tools I installed. But let's first look at some of the typical tools you have here. Similar to Lightroom, so you have further adjustments for detail, and those are interesting because you can sharpen, but you can also work on different types of detail. So micro contrast, for example, very fine details. Let's just zoom into some area here, see how this affects the image. So you can really go to the extremes, and I wouldn't do that typically, so let's just keep it low. Medium will work on details with another radius. So I find those tools pretty interesting and something to check for different types of images. But now I played with those and you'll already see them there here. So I can also just delete it again. So basically the edits panel is, think of it as a layers panel in Photoshop where I have different adjustment layers. Just that those here are much more powerful, it seems. Also Structure AI, it's again an AI tool where you can also add structure to an image, and it uses AI to analyze the image. So that's also interesting. For example, if you use one of those, and let's just go to the extreme, which I might not want for the complete image, so see the before and after, it's too much. You see for every of those adjustments, there's also this masking panel here. And if you click here, you have different ways to apply a mask here. So for this image, I don't think that the mask AI will work, but we'll just click on it so I can show you what it does. So it will analyze the image and try to figure out what are subjects, maybe sky, and then you get here a list of, okay, so there's a human, then we have architecture, and we have man-made ground, and then you can select those. But I don't want to use this. I just want to show you some of the others. For example, you also have a brush, and you can select the size, go down with the strength, and then you could say, okay, let's just select this area here. So it's highlighted also a bit, and maybe this area, and then your adjustment will just be applied. Let's also remove the show to this area here. And it's very subtle, so let's just increase it a bit, go with a higher strength, and really do a full adjustment here. Go back, and now the before and the after. And let's also boost it so you see what you can do just by combining adjustments and masks directly. What you can also do here in the masking panel, you can invert the mask so everything else would be affected. You can clear the mask, you can copy it. You have linear gradient, radial gradient, similar to what you have in Lightroom. Now, I really don't want to make this adjustment. I just used it to show you what you can do. So go back to edits. Now I remove the settings and I delete the adjustment. So this is typically how you can remove an adjustment. Now back to the tools. You see you have a lot of stuff here. You can add atmosphere, sun rays, matte, neon glow. It's an interesting effect. Then if you're using portrait, there's some very interesting tools here. Most of those use AI. You have super contrast, can work on contrast based on the tonality. So for example, just for the highlights, brings back some detail. You can also check the balance to see how much you want to affect. Shadow contrast also will bring back detail, and midtone contrast working on the midtones. So I think this is a very nice tool, which I already used. Color harmony is also interesting to use because you can use color contrast. And I would typically go with a high amount first and then check the hue for the colors you want to affect. For example, this here, and then tune down the amount so you have the setting you want. And then you can see before and after. So this could be something you might want to do, especially for architecture or very colorful images. And now I finally want to show you one of my favorite tools to use for such architecture night scenes, which is Magic Light. That's actually an AI tool, and click on it and bring up the intensity. It also here's a little rendering problem, which I think is due to the graphic card I use, but now it's gone. So just don't be confused. I don't think this square should be here, but also this square shows you where it identified the lights. Now I can increase the glow here, and now also I was using the Canon 1635 lens, which I think has 16 beams. I can make them very clear, and I can rotate them to fit the original beams. So you can basically create a sun star effect around your light sources, an effect like you would have from a lens if you stopped it down. And this way you can enhance. If you go down here with the clearness, you see I already have a sun star around it coming from the lens I used, but you can basically enhance it. So that's quite nice. And if you bring down the clearness, you can just work on the glow for the lights itself. So you can create the size, you can add intensity, so give those a very nice glow. And the beauty of this is that this Magic Light, the AI, basically identifies the light sources in the image and does a very good job. If it doesn't do a good job, you can use the masking, use a brush, and basically erase lights where you don't want the effect. So now you're having less of the effect here on this background light. So let's just remove it and see the before and after. So now it's just affecting here the foreground. Pretty nice and very intuitive to use. But as you can see, there's really a lot, and this here was just a very quick introduction. Now what you can do if you right click on it, you can export the image to different formats. This is something you might be used to from other programs, so JPEG, TIFF, so I typically use TIFF, or you can directly go to Photoshop. Now what you can also do, if you see down here, there's this actions. First off, you can see the before and after, so all the settings you did. You can get a slider where you see the difference you did to the image. You can fit it to screen. And then, very important, under actions, you can save all the settings you did as a preset. So this is the way you can create your own presets. And I won't do this now, but if you want to have a reusable set of edits for your photos, then this is the way you can create presets. Now let's get back to the catalog. And yeah, I think we're now at the end of this little overview for the full software. I also want to quickly show you how the plugin version would work. So let me just start Lightroom. Because I'm very used to using the raw edits here from Lightroom, that's my preferred way of also then interacting with Luminar Neo. If you don't have Lightroom, for example, as I showed you, you can use Luminar Neo alone. But if you already have Lightroom, you might want to use it as a plugin. So for example, I would just apply my typical settings. Let's just bring down the highlights, make temperature settings, bring up the shadows a bit, maybe some dehaze. So just the very basic raw settings. I could also use a Lightroom denoise AI if I want. But then I right click, and here under export you will see now there's Luminar Neo. And you can edit a copy with the Lightroom adjustments, which will basically create a TIFF file, so render the image, and then directly load it into Luminar Neo. And you also see some of the extensions, for example, the HDR merge or panorama, which I showed you, you can install as a plugin. You can directly access from here. For example, if you select 3 images from a bracketing sequence, you can directly send them to Luminar Neo to apply its HDR. But this is something for a different video. Now I want to just go to edit a copy with Lightroom settings. We'll now export the image from Lightroom and directly open it up in Luminar Neo. And you see up here, it's just presets and edits. So we no longer have the catalog here because this is the plugin version. So I can now directly go to edit and start with applying settings from, for example, here, the creative part, or I already have some favorites here, the Enhance AI, making the image a bit more vibrant here. And as you're used to from the full version, here are the edits which you can undo and delete. But let's just bring this back again. I would then go to apply. It will apply the settings and then save the image. If I go then back to Lightroom, I'll see the image popping up there. So this is a very smooth workflow. It also works in Photoshop. So basically create a layer, go to your plugins, your filters, and apply the Luminar Neo then to this separate layer. So you have the full flexibility to combine the different tools. And yeah, here you see it's already there. It adds an extension so you know which file it was, and it now has the Luminar settings applied. This is also if you want to use Luminar Neo, you sometimes will likely go over the top because you have so much editing power now. You would export it and then bring it together with the original Lightroom edited photo into Photoshop and selectively combine the two. So this is most likely how I will use it, and this is what I will show you later in separate videos. But for now, I hope you liked this little overview. Let me know what you think. Are you also using Luminar Neo? What's your favorite tool? Because as I said, I still have to figure out what all those tools do because it's so much, but maybe we can get some conversation going. And yeah, see you in the next video. Bye.